What happens when a trespassing Karen picks the wrong pool to invade? Ex-cop David Mitchell just wanted peace, but his entitled neighbor had other plans. What she didn't expect? Karma's about to make a splash. Watch till the end for the ultimate payback. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic. The dream interrupted. A warm Georgia sun beamed down on the pristine streets of Everwood Estates, a high-end neighborhood nestled in the suburbs of Atlanta. The lawns were perfectly manicured, the houses were worth millions, and the air was thick with the scent of magnolias and privilege. For David Mitchell, a former police officer with 15 years of service, this was the culmination of years of grinding overtime shifts, skipping vacations, and putting his life on the line. He had spent nearly 2 decades working his way up, enduring everything from domestic disputes to high-speed chases, all while dreaming of the day he could own a home like this, his sanctuary. And now, finally, he did. His 2-story dream home had everything he could ever want: a sprawling backyard, a state-of-the-art kitchen, and the crown jewel, a crystal-clear pool that shimmered under the summer sun. For the first time in his life, he could breathe. He leaned back in his lounge chair, eyes closed, taking in the soft hum of cicadas and the gentle ripple of water. It was a rare moment of peace, the kind he hadn't had in years, until the sirens shattered it. The sound was so jarring, so out of place in this postcard-perfect neighborhood, that for a brief moment, David's instincts kicked into cop mode. 2 patrol cars came to a screeching halt in front of his house, their tires skidding slightly against the hot pavement. His mind raced. What the hell is going on? Then he saw them. The officers stepping out, hands resting lightly on their holsters, eyes locked on him. One of them, a young officer, barely in his 20s, adjusted his belt and called out in that clipped, authoritative tone David knew all too well. "Sir, we received a report about a suspicious individual trespassing in this pool area." David sat up, his gut twisting. Suspicious individual? He didn't even have to turn his head to know who was watching from behind the curtains of the house next door. Lisa Reynolds. She was peering out through the slats of her blinds, smug smile firmly in place, the telltale glow of her phone still lighting up her face. This isn't the first time, and somehow he knew. It damn sure wouldn't be the last. 2 months earlier, David had only just moved in when he first noticed Lisa's piercing gaze from her 2nd-story window. She had that suburban, well-preserved look, blonde highlights, expensive yoga gear, and the demeanor of someone who had never been told no in her entire life. At first, he gave her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was just curious about the new neighbor. So he waved politely. She vanished behind the curtain. Odd. The next day, while picking up some home essentials at a local hardware store, his phone buzzed with a motion alert from his security system. When he checked the live feed, his blood ran cold. Lisa was in his backyard, not just peeking in, not just snooping. No, she had strolled through his unlocked side gate like she owned the place, wearing a designer swimsuit and carrying a luxury beach towel. She had laid out her things on his pool chair, dipped her feet into his water, and made herself at home, on his property. By the time he pulled into the driveway, she was still there, casually scrolling through her phone, legs kicking lazily in the water. She didn't even look up. David took a deep breath, reminding himself to keep his cool. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, stepping onto the patio. "What exactly are you doing?" Lisa looked up, gasped theatrically, and placed a manicured hand to her chest. "Oh, you startled me. I thought you were the new pool maintenance guy." David blinked. "The what?" Lisa stood up, grabbing her towel with a laugh. "The last owners let me use their pool whenever I wanted. It was kind of an arrangement we had." David kept his voice even. "Well, I'm not the pool guy. I'm the owner. And I'd appreciate it if you asked permission before coming onto my property." That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Lisa froze, then let out a forced little chuckle, her eyes raking over him in a way that made his skin crawl. "You? The owner?" she said, like the words tasted foreign in her mouth. Something in her tone, that subtle disbelief, made David's jaw tighten. Lisa gestured vaguely toward him. "I mean, I know the real estate agent who handled this property. She never mentioned—" She trailed off. But David knew exactly what she wasn't saying. There was no mistake. This was his home, and she was trespassing. He kept his voice calm but firm. "Mrs. Reynolds, I'd appreciate it if you left. Right now." Lisa's expression twisted, her face hardening as she gathered her things. But as she walked past him, she muttered just loud enough for him to hear. "We'll see about that." And the way she said it, it wasn't a warning. It was a promise. The escalation Lisa Reynolds wasn't the type of woman who heard the word no often. She was used to getting what she wanted, when she wanted it, whether it was cutting the line at Starbucks, snagging the best parking spot at the country club, or apparently using someone else's pool like it was her God-given right. And she wasn't about to let a newcomer, especially one like David Mitchell, change that. If anything, his refusal only made her more determined. For the next few days, David noticed little things. A shadow moving behind her curtains whenever he stepped outside. A glimpse of her standing at her fence, watching, and then the first bold move. One morning, David was heading to his car, ready to run some errands, when he caught a flash of movement in his backyard. His stomach dropped. He turned his head just in time to see Lisa slipping through his back gate. Again. And this time, she had company. 4 other women, all dressed in designer swimsuits, oversized sunglasses perched on their noses, were following her in, giggling like teenagers sneaking into a private beach resort. David's blood boiled. He marched through the house, flung open the patio door, and stepped onto the deck. Lisa was already lounging on one of his pool chairs, drink in hand. One of her friends was mid-cannonball, splashing into his water like she'd paid for the damn thing. David didn't bother with pleasantries. "What the hell is going on here?" Lisa turned her head ever so slowly, lowering her sunglasses just enough to give him a condescending smile. "Oh, David," she sighed, "you really need to learn how to loosen up. We're just having a little fun." Just having fun? In his pool? On his property? One of the women shifted uncomfortably. "Lisa, I thought you said you had permission." Lisa waved her off. "Oh, don't be ridiculous, Emily. I said I knew the owner." David exhaled through his nose, counting to 10, like he used to do on the force when dealing with belligerent drunks. "Lisa," he said, his voice clipped, "you are trespassing. All of you are trespassing." Lisa rolled her eyes. "David, come on. The last owners never minded. What's the big deal?" "The big deal," he said evenly, "is that this is my house, and you're in my pool without my permission." Lisa pursed her lips, clearly not used to being challenged. Then her voice dropped into something sickly sweet. "Well, you don't have to be so aggressive about it. I mean, you were a cop, right? Maybe that's why you're so intense." David stared at her, his patience wearing thin. "You have 30 seconds to leave before I call the real cops," he said. Lisa's smile flickered, and for the first time a hint of uncertainty crossed her face. Her friends, however, weren't willing to take that risk. One by one, they scrambled out of the pool, grabbing their things. Lisa was the last to leave. She took her time drying off, adjusting her towel, and finally, when she reached the gate, she turned back and said, "Go ahead. Call them. I know everyone at the precinct. My husband plays golf with the captain." Then she left, completely unfazed. David stood there for a long moment, fists clenched, and that was when he realized this wasn't over. The trespassing gets worse. David wasn't the type to act on impulse. He had spent 15 years on the force, learning how to stay calm under pressure, how to read people, how to de-escalate situations. And he could read Lisa Reynolds like a book. She was entitled, she was vindictive, and most of all, she was dangerous in ways that didn't leave bruises. She wouldn't storm back in and trash his house. No, that would be too obvious. Instead, she'd play the long game. And she did. Over the next few weeks, Lisa's petty games escalated. She started lurking around his fence, peering into his backyard like a nosy landlord checking on a tenant. His morning newspaper disappeared, only for him to see a blurry figure, matching Lisa's height, on his security footage, swiping it at 6 a.m. sharp. Anonymous complaints flooded the HOA, claiming his grass was too long, his yard was unkempt, his fence needed repainting, all of which were completely false. Late at night, his cameras caught her slipping into his garden, a small bottle in hand. The next morning, his prized rose bushes were dead, poisoned by what was clearly plant killer. She was trying to make his life miserable. And the worst part? It was working. David could handle criminals. He could handle thieves, liars, and manipulators. But Lisa wasn't breaking the law, at least not in ways that would get her arrested. She was harassing him in broad daylight, in ways that were hard to prove to the police, but obvious to anyone paying attention. And the final straw? The book club incident. One Saturday afternoon, David pulled into his driveway, groceries in hand, only to find 8 women sitting around his pool, drinking wine like they were at a private resort. Lisa sat at the center of it all, leading a book discussion as if she hadn't just broken into his property again. He stormed into the backyard, dropping the grocery bags onto the deck. Lisa didn't even blink. "Oh, David," she sighed dramatically. "You weren't supposed to be home yet." David saw red. "This is your final warning," he said through gritted teeth. "If you trespass again, I'm calling the cops." Lisa smirked. "Go ahead, call them. Let's see who they believe." David clenched his jaw. Then a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Mr. Mitchell?" David turned. 2 uniformed officers, Officer Davis and Officer Martinez, had just stepped into the yard. Lisa immediately switched to performance mode, eyes welling up with fake tears. "Oh, thank God you're here," she gasped. "This man is harassing us. We've always had access to this pool, and he's being completely unreasonable." David barely held back a laugh. Officer Davis looked at David, then at Lisa, and his entire demeanor shifted. "Ma'am, Mr. Mitchell is a former officer. If he says you're trespassing, you're trespassing. Now I suggest you and your friends leave, before this becomes official." Lisa's face turned beet red. She opened her mouth, to argue, to protest, to do whatever she always did to get her way. But she saw the look in Officer Davis's eyes. This time, she wasn't going to win. Her friends scattered like cockroaches, hurriedly packing up their things. Lisa lingered for one long moment, glaring at David with pure hatred. Then as she turned to leave, she muttered under her breath, "This isn't over." And for the first time since this nightmare began, David believed her. The last straw. Lisa Reynolds wasn't just annoying, she was dangerous in the way that privileged people who think they're untouchable often are. And after weeks of relentless harassment, David Mitchell knew one thing for certain. Lisa wasn't going to stop until she drove him out. But what Lisa didn't know was that she had finally pushed him too far. And this time, she wasn't dealing with a pushover neighbor. She was dealing with a man who had spent 15 years taking down criminals who thought they were smarter than him. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. The final straw. Lisa's campaign against David had started with petty inconveniences, stealing his newspaper, spreading lies about him in the neighborhood, poisoning his plants. But then, she took it to another level. One morning, David woke up and stepped outside only to freeze in horror. His pristine pool, his pride and joy, was ruined. The once clear water was now a foaming, soapy mess, bubbling with thick dish detergent that would take days to filter out. David felt his fingernails dig into his palms. This wasn't just petty anymore. This was calculated, personal. He stormed inside, pulled up his security footage, and there she was, Lisa sneaking into his backyard at 2 a.m., carrying a massive bottle of dish soap and dumping the entire thing into his pool with a smug little flourish. David exhaled slowly. Lisa wanted war. She just got one. The perfect plan. David sat at his kitchen table, staring at the screen of his laptop, replaying the footage over and over. He could call the cops. He could take the footage straight to the HOA. But Lisa had connections. She had influence. No, if he wanted this to end, he needed to make sure that Lisa destroyed herself. And then, he remembered something. Years ago, back when he was still on the force, his old partner told him about a prank case they once handled. Some college kids had poured a special kind of non-toxic dye into their fraternity's pool. The catch? The dye didn't activate right away. It only reacted with certain chemicals, the ones commonly found in expensive sunscreens and luxury cosmetics. The result? Anyone who swam in the water turned a bright, unmistakable shade of green, a color that wouldn't wash off for days. David's lips curled into a slow, deliberate smile. Lisa wanted to steal his pool? Fine. He'd give it to her, but he was going to make damn sure she never wanted to come back. Setting the trap. David did his research carefully. The dye was completely safe, used by professional pool maintenance companies to detect leaks. It wouldn't damage the pool. It wouldn't harm anyone. But it would stain the skin for at least a week. Perfect. He ordered the dye online and tested it in a small bucket, mixing it with a sample of Lisa's favorite high-end sunscreen, which she had carelessly left on one of his lounge chairs after her last trespassing stunt. The result? Flawless. The second the sunscreen touched the water, it activated the dye, turning the water a bright, toxic-looking shade of green. But on its own, the water remained crystal clear. By the time the package arrived, David had already set up extra hidden cameras, ensuring he captured every angle of what was about to unfold. Now, all he had to do was wait. The perfect storm. Through the neighborhood grapevine, David caught wind of Lisa's latest stunt. She was planning another unauthorized pool party. This time, she wasn't even trying to hide it. She boasted to a few of the local wives about how she had figured out David's schedule. "He's gone all day on Saturdays," she told them. "Trust me, it'll be fine. Bring your best swimsuit." David almost laughed out loud when he heard that. She really thought she had outsmarted him. So that Saturday, David made sure Lisa saw him pack up his car. He even waved at her as he pulled out of the driveway. Then instead of leaving, he parked around the block, slipped back into his house through the side gate, and settled into his office. Security app open, cameras rolling, and right on cue. At exactly 2 p.m., Lisa made her grand entrance. She strutted through his back gate like she owned the place. 6 of her equally entitled friends in tow, each one carrying expensive beach bags and designer sunglasses. They set up their illegal little party with practiced efficiency, champagne bottles popping, overpriced snacks spread out, Bluetooth speakers playing soft jazz. Lisa raised her glass, smiling smugly. "Welcome to our Saturday sanctuary," she said. "What the new owner doesn't know won't hurt him." David leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Oh, Lisa, you have no idea." One by one, the women slathered on their expensive sunscreen. Lisa was the first to dive in, making a graceful, elegant splash. "The water's perfect," she called out. Her friends followed. For a few moments, everything was normal. And then, the screaming started. Karma hits like a freight train. It started with Lisa's best friend, Susan. "Uh, Lisa," Susan said, staring at her arm in horror. Lisa turned her head, annoyed. "What?" Susan held up her hand. It was green, a bright, unmistakable neon shade of green. Lisa frowned, then looked down at her own hands. And that was when she saw it. Her arms, her shoulders, her entire torso were turning the same sickly shade of emerald. Lisa let out a shriek so ear-piercing that David actually winced. Her friends screamed in unison, scrambling to get out of the pool, but it was too late. The dye was activated. Their expensive swimsuits, their designer handbags, their perfectly manicured skin, all green. "I have a wedding next week," one woman wailed. "I look like I belong in a damn Shrek movie," another sobbed. Lisa stumbled out of the water, shaking, her face contorted in rage. And then she saw it, one of David's security cameras, its tiny red light blinking cheerfully. David pressed a button on his phone, and just like that, the sprinklers turned on. Lisa let out a final, agonized shriek as freezing water pelted down from every angle, washing away her dignity but not her brand-new green hue. The great exodus began. 6 screaming, streaky green women sprinting through the neighborhood, dripping wet, leaving a trail of neon footprints behind them. And David? He just sat back watching the show. Because this was only the beginning. The final humiliation, Lisa Reynolds had no idea how badly she'd lost. At first, she thought this was just a temporary setback, an annoying prank that she could smooth over with her usual charm and manipulation. She was wrong, because David Mitchell wasn't done with her yet. And by the time this was over, Lisa wouldn't just be embarrassed, she'd be destroyed. The aftermath: by Sunday morning, Lisa had gone into full damage control mode. She scrubbed her skin raw, trying to wash off the stubborn green tint. Nothing worked. Her expensive soaps, Useless. Her overpriced exfoliators? A waste of time. Even the emergency trip to her dermatologist? A complete disaster. The best they could offer was a chemical peel, which Lisa flat out refused, because that would mean admitting what happened. So instead, she did what she always did. She lied. By Monday morning, a new post appeared in the Everwood Estates Facebook group. Lisa Reynolds, "Hey everyone! Just a quick warning. Looks like someone has been dumping unsafe chemicals in the neighborhood pools. I had a terrible allergic reaction this weekend. Be careful and let's make sure our community stays safe." Classic Lisa, trying to paint herself as the victim, hoping no one would put two and two together. Unfortunately for her, someone already had. When the video drops that afternoon, David made his next move. He had spent the entire night editing security footage, clips of Lisa repeatedly sneaking into his backyard, footage of her dumping dish soap into his pool, her smug little speech about how what the new owner doesn't know won't hurt him, and finally the grand finale, Lisa and her friends emerging from the water, screaming, streaky green, running for their lives. He added background music, the same soft jazz they'd been playing at their unauthorized pool party. Then he uploaded the video with the title, "When Trespassing Goes Wrong Within an Hour." It had over 10,000 views. By that evening, it had tripled. By Tuesday morning, the local news stations were calling him for an interview. And Lisa? Lisa was completely screwed. Lisa's meltdown. The first sign that Lisa had completely lost it was when she stormed into the HOA meeting that night, still slightly green, and demanded action. "This is harassment," she screeched. "That video is defamation. I want it taken down immediately." The room was silent. Then someone in the back started humming a tune. "It's not easy being green." The room erupted in laughter. Lisa's face flushed red, a color that didn't mix well with her still fading green hue. She spun around, eyes blazing. "You think this is funny?" No one answered, because at that exact moment, someone's phone pinged loudly. It was another notification about the video. Lisa let out a wordless scream and stormed out. Her job is gone by Wednesday morning. Lisa's real estate agency had officially distanced themselves from her. Their Facebook page was flooded with comments. "Can we trust an agent who trespasses on private property? Does she come with the houses she sells? If I buy from her, does that mean she gets to use my pool too?" By Thursday, her company released a statement. "We take property rights very seriously. The actions of the individual in the video do not reflect our company's values. We have terminated our relationship with Lisa Reynolds, effective immediately." Translation? Lisa just lost her job. When her friends turned on her, Lisa's social circle wasn't faring much better. Some of them were still faintly green, and no amount of high-end concealer could fully cover the damage. They started distancing themselves fast. One of them left the Everwood Estates Facebook group entirely. Another unfriended Lisa on social media. A third posted a cryptic message, "Be careful who you trust. Some people will drag you down with them." Lisa had gone from the queen bee of the neighborhood to a social pariah in less than a week, and she knew exactly who to blame. The final attempt at revenge. Lisa wasn't the type to go down without a fight, and her last move was as pathetic as it was desperate. She sent David a cease and desist letter demanding he take down the video. David responded by forwarding it to his lawyer. The lawyer's response? A beautifully detailed compilation of Lisa's trespassing incidents with time-stamped footage. The vandalism she committed, including the footage of her poisoning his plants. Her multiple false police reports against him. Then came the real kicker. If Mrs. Reynolds would like to escalate this matter legally, we are prepared to countersue for harassment, defamation, and property damage. Lisa never followed up. She knew she had already lost. The sign goes up. 2 weeks later, a for sale sign appeared in Lisa's front yard. No announcement, no goodbyes. She just disappeared. And the best part? Real estate agents showing her house had to legally disclose the pool incident. No, the pool dye wasn't permanent. Yes, the previous owner did attempt to use the pool without permission. Yes, the incident is on YouTube. Potential buyers took one look at the video and said, "Yeah, we'll pass." Lisa's house sat on the market for months. When she finally sold it, she took a massive loss. And David? David thrived. 1 year later, Everwood Estates had changed. Lisa was gone, and with her went the toxicity. David's pool, once the center of so much conflict, had become the heart of the neighborhood. Families held birthday parties there. Kids practiced swimming lessons in the summer. His weekend barbecues became legendary. And mounted near his pool gate, a small framed photo, a screenshot from his security footage, showing Lisa and her friends sprinting out of his yard, soaking wet, covered in green dye. Whenever guests asked about it, David would just smile and say, "That's a reminder that karma always finds its way home." And with that, he'd lean back in his lounge chair, sip his lemonade, and enjoy the peaceful, perfect silence of a life free from entitled Karens.